He needed $300 to save his daughter. But the real problem wasn't the hospital, it was his job. Because every month, someone inside that company was stealing his salary. Everything looked fine. Too clean on paper means something is hidden. No one complained, which means someone already tried. Silence doesn't mean peace, it means fear. Nothing was broken enough to report, but everything was wrong enough to feel. This wasn't a bad store. This was a controlled failure. He didn't stop. He didn't even wipe the tears. He just kept working. And that's when she knew this wasn't stress. Someone was taking his money. He needed $300 to save his daughter. But the real problem wasn't the hospital. It was his job. Because every month, someone inside that company was stealing his salary. Everything looked fine. Too fine. Angela Brooks had built her entire life on numbers. At 40, she was the kind of woman people didn't interrupt. Tall, composed, with a posture so straight it felt deliberate, Angela carried herself like someone who had earned control the hard way and had no intention of losing it. Her skin was a deep, even tone, her features sharp and precise, and her dark hair was pulled tightly into a low bun that never moved out of place. She dressed in clean lines, tailored suits, neutral colors, nothing unnecessary, because to her, clarity wasn't just a mindset, it was a discipline. She had grown up with very little. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Her father left before she was old enough to remember his face. At 22, Angela had been stacking boxes in a small grocery store, learning how to survive on instinct and observation. That was where she first learned something that stayed with her for years. If you watched closely enough, you could always tell when something was wrong. Now, she was the CEO of a supermarket chain worth hundreds of millions of dollars, 42 branches, thousands of employees, systems layered on top of systems to ensure consistency, efficiency, predictability. And yet, something didn't feel right. The report said everything was stable. Sales were steady, staff turnover was within acceptable limits, no complaints flagged, no incidents recorded. Everything was fine. Angela stared at the screen in her office, high above the city, where the glass walls reflected a version of success most people would admire. But she didn't trust it, because she had seen fine before, and fine was often where problems learned to hide. She stood abruptly, grabbing her coat. No announcement, no explanation, just a quiet decision. An hour later, she was no longer a CEO. She was just another customer. The transformation was simple but effective. The sharp blazer replaced with a worn gray jacket, silk blouse swapped for a plain t-shirt, dark jeans, flat shoes. Her hair tucked under a navy cap shadowing her face. Even the way she walked changed, less direct, less commanding, blending into the background, invisible. The Ohio branch stood ahead of her, one of the older locations, one of the stable ones. Angela stepped through the sliding doors. The first thing she noticed was the smell. Not strong, not unbearable, just wrong. Stale air, the kind that builds slowly when small things are ignored. Her eyes adjusted quickly, scanning without appearing to. Shelves lined the aisles, but not fully. Gaps where products should have been. Items leaning, slightly out of place, like no one had bothered to fix them. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, but enough. Angela picked up a basket, her fingers brushing against the plastic. Slightly sticky, not cleaned properly. Her jaw tightened just a fraction. Too clean on paper means something is hidden. She moved deeper into the store. A flickering light buzzed faintly overhead. One aisle had entire sections missing products. In the produce area, fruits looked tired, bananas spotted too early, greens wilting at the edges. A woman in her 50s, dressed in a simple coat, picked up an apple, studied it for a moment, then quietly put it back and walked away without buying anything. Angela watched her go. No one stopped her. No one noticed. Silence doesn't mean peace. It means fear. Employees were present, but distant. Two stood close together, speaking in low voices, their bodies slightly turned away from the rest of the store. Another moved slowly, restocking shelves without urgency, without care, like the outcome didn't matter anymore. No one made eye contact. No one smiled. No one asked if she needed help. Nothing was broken enough to report, but everything was wrong enough to feel. Angela felt it now, that quiet tension under the surface. Not chaos, not failure, something worse. Control. This wasn't a bad store. This was a controlled failure. She continued walking until she reached the checkout area. 4 registers were open. 3 had short lines. The 4th, register 3, was empty. Angela slowed. That wasn't normal. Then she saw him. The man behind the register looked to be in his early 30s, lean, slightly underweight, with sharp cheekbones that stood out more than they should have. His dark hair was unkempt, not messy by style, but by neglect. A faint line of stubble shadowed his jaw, as if shaving had become less important lately. His uniform was clean, carefully worn, someone who still respected the job, even if the job didn't respect him back. His name tag read, Daniel. His hands moved quickly, efficiently, scanning items, packing bags, professional, controlled. But his eyes were red. And as Angela stood there watching, a tear slipped down his face. He didn't react. He didn't stop. He didn't even wipe it away. He just kept working. Beep, beep, beep. No one in line said anything. No one asked if he was okay. No one cared. No one dared. Angela felt something shift inside her. Not confusion, not doubt, recognition. She had seen this before. People don't break like that, unless something has been breaking them for a long time. Daniel finished with a customer, handed over the bag, and forced a small, automatic smile. "Have a good day." The customer walked away without looking at him, and just like that, he reset, ready for the next person, like nothing had happened. Angela stepped forward slowly, placing her basket on the counter. For a brief second, Daniel looked up. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Angela didn't see an employee. She saw a man who had run out of options. A man holding something in, because he couldn't afford to let it out. He reached for the first item in her basket. Beep! His hands were steady. Too steady. Angela didn't say anything. Not yet. Because now she understood something far more important than any report could ever tell her. This wasn't stress. This wasn't just a bad day. This wasn't even a bad store. Something deeper was wrong. Something hidden. Something deliberate. Angela stood there, watching him work, her mind already moving faster than the situation itself. If everything looked fine, and no one was speaking, then whatever was happening here had been happening for a long time. And if that was true, then one question mattered more than anything else. Who was stealing from him? He was about to say, nothing, just like every other day. But this time, someone was watching. Someone who didn't look away. Angela placed her basket down, one item at a time, slow enough to force a moment that didn't exist for anyone else in the line. Daniel didn't notice at first. His hands moved automatically, scanning each item with precision. Barcode, beep, slide, bag. The rhythm of someone who had repeated the same motion thousands of times until it became muscle memory. But up close, the details were clearer. His fingers were slightly pale at the tips, as if he had been clenching them too often. His wrist trembled, barely visible unless you were looking for it. And Angela was. "Long shift?" she asked, her voice calm, neutral, just another customer making conversation. Daniel didn't look up immediately. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, polite, automatic. His voice was low, steady, but it carried a weight that didn't belong to the question. Angela studied him. His face was sharper than it should have been, cheekbones pressing against tired skin, dark circles under his eyes that no amount of sleep could explain, because this wasn't about sleep. This was about something else, something ongoing. "You okay?" she asked, softer this time. That was the moment. Daniel's hands paused, just for half a second, not enough for anyone else to notice, but Angela saw it. "I'm fine," he said quickly, almost too quickly. The kind of answer that existed to end a conversation, not continue one. Angela didn't move. She had learned something a long time ago. When someone says, "I'm fine," too fast, they're not. "You don't look fine," she said. There was no accusation in her tone, no pressure, just a statement. Daniel finally looked up. For a brief second, their eyes met again. And this time, it wasn't just exhaustion Angela saw. It was resistance, the kind that builds when someone has spent too long holding something in and doesn't know what would happen if they let it out. "I said I'm fine," he repeated, quieter now. Angela didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached into her basket, adjusting an item that didn't need adjusting, giving him space without stepping back. Behind her, a man in line shifted impatiently, a middle-aged customer with a thick neck and a slightly irritated expression, dressed in a wrinkled blue shirt. He tapped his fingers lightly on the counter, the subtle rhythm of someone who didn't want to wait but didn't want to complain either. Time moved again. Beep, beep. Daniel resumed scanning, faster now, too fast, as if speed could cover something up. Angela watched his hands. Then she noticed it again, another tear, caught just at the edge of his jawline before it dropped. He still didn't wipe it away. "Hey," Angela said quietly. That word alone carried more weight than the conversation before it. Daniel stopped again. "Look at me," she added. It wasn't a command, but it felt like one. Slowly, reluctantly, he did. And that was when it broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. His jaw tightened, his lips pressed together as if holding back something that had been building for too long. His shoulders lifted slightly with a breath he didn't want to take. "Do you ever," Angela began, choosing her words carefully, "feel like no matter how much you work, it's never enough?" That was the wrong question, or maybe the right one, because it didn't just touch the surface, it went straight through it. Daniel let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but without humor. "Every day," he said, and then he looked down again. Angela didn't interrupt. She waited. Silence stretched between them, not empty but heavy, the kind of silence that gives someone one last chance to pull back. Daniel didn't. "My daughter," he started, then stopped. His voice caught just for a second. Angela didn't move. "She's in the hospital," he said finally. The words came out flat, controlled, like he had rehearsed them in his head 100 times already. Angela felt something tighten in her chest. "How old?" she asked. 5, he replied. 5. Angela's expression didn't change, but inside, something shifted. Daniel continued, quieter now. "She got sick 3 days ago. Fever wouldn't go down. They ran tests, kept her overnight." He swallowed. "Now they're saying she needs medication, something specific, something we don't have at home." His hands had stopped moving completely now. The scanner sat idle between them. "How much?" Angela asked. Daniel hesitated. That question was harder than the rest. $300, he said finally. It sounded small. It wasn't. Angela knew that. Because she had lived in a world where $300 could decide everything. "I just need a little time," Daniel added quickly, almost defensively. "I'll figure it out. I always do." But his eyes said something else. They said he had already tried. "They haven't paid me yet," he continued, his voice dropping slightly. "It's been late, again. And even when it comes, it's not what it's supposed to be." Angela's focus sharpened instantly. Not what it's supposed to be. "What do you mean?" she asked. Daniel shook his head quickly. "It's nothing. Probably just deductions or something. They said it's normal." "They said." Angela filed that away. "But it keeps happening," he added, almost to himself, month after month. Behind Angela, the impatient customer cleared his throat louder this time. "Can we move this along?" he muttered. The spell broke. Daniel straightened immediately, snapping back into roll. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, voice steady again, hands moving fast as he resumed scanning. Beep, beep. The moment was gone. Or at least, that's what it looked like. Angela paid without another word. She didn't push. Not yet. Because she already had what she needed. Not the full truth, but enough. As Daniel handed her the bag, their fingers brushed slightly. His hand was cold. Too cold. Angela took the bag slowly, her mind already racing ahead, connecting pieces that didn't fit. A man working this hard still couldn't afford $300. A salary that arrived late and wasn't complete. A staff that stayed silent even when something was clearly wrong. Angela turned to leave, walking past the line, past the flickering lights, past the quiet, controlled decay of the store. But just before she stepped out, she stopped. Something Daniel had said replayed in her mind. They said it's normal. Angela looked back once. He was already serving the next customer. Same rhythm, same silence, like nothing had happened. And that's when a new question formed, sharper than the last one. If he had already asked, and someone told him it was normal, then how many people already knew? They didn't just lose money, they lost the courage to ask where it went, and that was far more dangerous. Angela didn't leave the store. Not yet. She stepped just outside the sliding doors, the cool air brushing against her face, but her mind stayed inside, walking those aisles again, replaying every detail, the smell, the empty shelves, the way employees avoided eye contact, the way Daniel had said, they said it's normal. Normal. Angela had spent her entire career eliminating that word. In her company, nothing unexplained was ever supposed to become normal. She turned back and walked in again, slower this time, not as a customer browsing, but as someone measuring something invisible. She moved past the produce section and toward a side aisle where a woman was restocking cleaning supplies. The employee was in her late 20s, tall and thin with a slightly hunched posture, like someone who had gotten used to making herself smaller over time. Her name tag read Lena Ortiz. Her skin was light olive, her dark hair tied loosely in a low ponytail with strands falling out around her face. There was a quiet sharpness in her eyes, but it was buried under something heavier, fatigue maybe, or resignation. She didn't notice Angela at first. Her movements were slow but precise. She adjusted each bottle carefully, aligning them with unnecessary perfection, like it was the only thing she could still control. Angela stopped beside her. "Busy day?" she asked casually. Lena glanced up, startled for a second, then forced a polite smile. "Not really, just the usual." The usual. Angela leaned slightly closer to the shelf, pretending to inspect a product. "Feels a little quiet," she said. Lena let out a small breath, almost a laugh. "Yeah, it's been like that." Angela watched her carefully. Same tone, same pattern, surface answers. "Do people not come here anymore?" Angela asked. "They do," Lena replied. "Just not like before." She stopped adjusting the bottles and straightened up slightly. For a moment, she looked like she was about to say something else. Then she didn't. Angela recognized that pause, that exact moment when someone decides it's safer to stay quiet. "Something wrong with the store?" Angela asked. Lena hesitated. Then she shook her head. "No, everything's fine." There it was again. Angela held her gaze a second longer than normal. Lena looked away first. That told her everything she needed to know. Angela continued walking. This time, she wasn't looking for problems. She was looking for patterns. At the back of the store, near a narrow hallway that led to the staff area, she saw two employees speaking in low voices. One of them was a man in his mid-30s, broad-shouldered but slightly slouched, wearing a wrinkled uniform that suggested he had stopped caring about appearances. His name tag read Marcus Hill. His skin was dark, his beard uneven and patchy, like it hadn't been trimmed in weeks. There was something hardened about his expression, the kind of look people develop after being disappointed too many times. The other employee was younger, maybe early 20s, thin, with nervous energy in the way he shifted his weight from foot to foot. He kept glancing around as if making sure no one was listening. Angela slowed her pace. "I'm telling you, it's not adding up," the younger one whispered. Marcus shook his head. "Lower your voice." "It's been happening for months," the younger man insisted. "My check—" Marcus cut him off sharply. "I said drop it." The tone changed everything. This wasn't advice. It was a warning. The younger employee went quiet immediately, looking down, shoulders tightening. Angela kept walking, as if she hadn't heard anything. But inside, the pieces were starting to align. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a mistake. This was something people knew about, but had learned not to talk about. She circled back toward the front of the store. Daniel was still at register 3. Same posture, same rhythm. But now Angela noticed something she hadn't before. No one chose his line. Customers glanced at him, then moved to another register. It wasn't just that he had been crying. It was something else, something quieter. Avoidance. Angela stepped closer again, this time not as a customer, but as an observer. A woman in line at the next register leaned slightly toward another customer and whispered, just loud enough for Angela to hear. "That one, he's been having issues." "What kind of issues?" the other asked. The first woman shrugged. "Money, I think. Always looks like that." Angela's eyes narrowed slightly. Always. This wasn't new. She moved away again, her pace steady, her thoughts anything but. Daniel's salary was wrong. Lena knew something, but wouldn't say it. Marcus knew more, but actively shut it down. The younger employee had tried to question it and got silenced. And the customers, they had noticed too. Not the details, but the effects. Angela stopped near the entrance again, her reflection faintly visible in the glass doors. She barely recognized herself, not because of the disguise, but because of what she was seeing. This wasn't a broken system. Broken systems are loud. They collapse. They fail visibly. This was different. This was controlled, careful, hidden just enough to survive. Angela exhaled slowly. She had built a company that was supposed to protect people like Daniel, people who showed up every day, people who did their jobs right, even when life was falling apart. And somewhere inside that system, someone had found a way to take from them. Not once, not by accident, but repeatedly, quietly, confidently. Angela's fingers curled slightly at her side. For the first time since she walked into the store, she felt it. Not doubt, not discomfort, anger, cold, controlled, focused. Because now she understood something deeper than numbers, deeper than reports, deeper than what anyone had said out loud. When everyone stays silent, it doesn't mean nothing is wrong. It means something already happened. Something bad enough that speaking up didn't change anything. Angela turned her head slightly, looking back toward Daniel one last time. He was still working, still quiet, still holding everything in. And suddenly, the question in her mind changed again. It wasn't just who was stealing. That part, she would find out. What mattered now was something else. If everyone here already knew, then how long had this been happening without anyone stopping it? Someone had already tried, and whatever happened to them was enough to silence everyone else. Angela didn't need more guesses. She needed confirmation. She walked back to register 3, not rushing, not drawing attention, just another customer circling back through a store that looked fine to anyone who wasn't paying attention. Daniel was still there, still working with the same controlled precision, but now Angela could see the cost of it. His shoulders were tighter, his breathing slightly uneven. He was holding himself together, piece by piece, in real time. Angela stepped into his line again. This time there was no one behind her. For a brief moment, it felt like the rest of the store had faded out. Daniel looked up, surprised. Recognition flickered across his face, followed quickly by caution. "You forgot something?" he asked. Angela placed a single item on the counter, a bottle of water, nothing important, just an excuse to stay. "Maybe," she said quietly, "or maybe I just had another question." Daniel hesitated. His eyes shifted briefly toward the other registers, then toward the back of the store. He already knew what kind of question this was going to be. "You shouldn't," he said under his breath. Angela didn't react. "Shouldn't what?" "Ask," he replied, almost inaudible. That was all the answer she needed. Angela leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough that it wouldn't carry. "You said your pay wasn't right," she said, "and that it keeps happening." Daniel's jaw tightened again. "It's fine," he said automatically. Angela didn't move. "It's not," she said. Silence. Daniel's hand hovered over the scanner, unmoving. Angela waited, because she knew something now, something more important than any question she could ask. He wasn't afraid of being wrong. He was afraid of being heard. "It's not just me," Daniel said finally. His voice was low, controlled, but different this time, less defensive, more resigned. Angela didn't interrupt. She let him continue. "It's everyone," he added. "At least, most of us." Angela felt her chest tighten slightly, but her face remained neutral. "How long?" she asked. Daniel exhaled slowly. "I don't know exactly. A year, maybe more?" He paused. "It started small, easy to ignore. Then it just became normal." That word again, normal. Angela's fingers pressed lightly against the counter. "Did anyone report it?" she asked. That was the question that changed everything. Daniel didn't answer immediately. His eyes shifted again, toward the back office this time, then away. "Yeah," he said. Angela's focus sharpened. "Who?" Daniel hesitated longer now. This wasn't just information. This was something buried. "Her name was Sarah," he said finally. The name hung in the air like something fragile. Angela didn't recognize it, which meant Sarah had never made it far enough up the system to matter. "Tell me," Angela said. Daniel swallowed. "She worked here about 6 months ago," he began. "Cashier, same as me." His voice shifted slightly, not just describing, but remembering. "She was different." Angela waited. Daniel searched for the right words. "Not loud," he said, "but not quiet either. She didn't ignore things." Flashback. Sarah Whitaker was in her early 30s, with a slim, upright posture that made her seem taller than she actually was. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under fluorescent lights, and her blonde hair was always tied into a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. She had sharp blue eyes, too sharp for a place like this, the kind of eyes that noticed things most people preferred to ignore. She wasn't confrontational, but she was persistent, the kind of person who asked questions, and didn't stop when the answers didn't make sense. Angela could picture her already. Daniel continued. "She noticed the pay first," he said, before anyone else said anything out loud. "What did she do?" Angela asked. "She documented everything," Daniel replied. "Paychecks, hours, discrepancies. She kept records." Angela felt something cold settle in her chest. Smart, careful, systematic. Sarah had done exactly what she should have done. "And then?" Angela pressed. Daniel's expression darkened. "She sent an email," he said, "to corporate." Angela's mind moved instantly. There was no record of it. There should have been. What happened after that? Daniel let out a short, humorless breath. She got called into the manager's office the next day. Flashback continues. The manager's office was small, windowless, lit by a single overhead bulb that buzzed faintly. Kevin sat behind the desk. Kevin Hale, mid-40s, broad frame, thick neck, the kind of man who filled a room not with presence, but with pressure. His hair was cut short, his jaw heavy, his eyes small and watchful. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. People listened to him because they understood something instinctively. He controlled what mattered. Schedules, hours, pay, your ability to stay or leave. Sarah sat across from him, back straight, hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't look afraid. Not yet. "I saw your email," Kevin said calmly. Sarah nodded. "Then you know there's a problem." Kevin leaned back slightly, studying her. "No," he said. "There's a misunderstanding." Sarah didn't blink. "The numbers don't match." Kevin smiled, not kindly. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "people misunderstand how things work." The air in the room shifted. Sarah felt it, but she didn't back down. "I'm not misunderstanding," she said. That was the moment everything changed. Daniel's voice dropped as he continued. "She was gone 3 days later." Angela didn't move. "Fired?" she asked. Daniel nodded. No explanation, just gone. The store noise seemed louder now, or maybe Angela was just hearing it differently. She told people what she found before she left, Daniel added. Tried to warn us. Angela's jaw tightened slightly. And? Daniel looked down. No one did anything. Why? Angela asked. Daniel met her eyes again. This time, there was no hesitation. Because we saw what happened to her. Silence settled between them again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was heavy with something undeniable. Angela straightened slightly, her mind no longer searching, but confirming. This wasn't hidden. It wasn't invisible. It had been seen. It had been reported. And it had been shut down. Completely. Deliberately. Angela picked up the bottle of water, her grip tightening just slightly. Because now the situation had changed. This wasn't just theft. This wasn't just corruption. This was something deeper, something structured. A system that didn't just take money, but removed anyone who tried to expose it. Angela looked past Daniel toward the back office, toward Kevin, and for the first time since she walked into the store, the question in her mind wasn't just about what was happening. It was about how far it went. If someone had already tried to stop this and disappeared in 3 days, then how many others had been erased before anyone noticed? It wasn't a mistake, it wasn't a glitch, and it definitely wasn't an accident. Someone had been stealing with precision. Angela didn't go back to the register. She didn't need to. What Daniel had said, what Sarah had tried to expose, it was already enough to shift her from suspicion to certainty. But certainty wasn't enough. Angela Brooks didn't act on feelings. She acted on proof. She stepped out of the store again, this time without hesitation, her pace calm but purposeful. To anyone watching, she was just another customer leaving, but inside, her mind had already accelerated far beyond the moment. Her car was parked across the street. Inside, her driver sat quietly, hands resting on the wheel, trained not to ask questions. Beside him, in the back seat, sat a man in a dark suit, posture straight, eyes alert. This was David Chen, head of internal operations. David was in his early 40s, slightly shorter than Angela, with a lean build and a composed demeanor that bordered on rigid. His hair was neatly combed back, streaked slightly at the temples, and his thin-framed glasses rested perfectly on a face that rarely showed emotion. He had spent over a decade inside the company, rising quietly through the ranks, not because he was loud or charismatic, but because he understood systems, numbers, patterns, and more importantly, anomalies. When Angela opened the door and stepped in, David already knew something was wrong. "You found something," he said. It wasn't a question. Angela closed the door behind her. "I need full payroll access for this branch," she said immediately. "Now." David didn't hesitate. He reached into his briefcase, pulling out a secured tablet, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. "Live records or archived?" he asked. "Everything," Angela replied. The car remained silent except for the faint tapping of keys. A moment later, the data loaded. Rows of names, numbers, payment cycles, adjustments. Angela leaned forward slightly, her eyes scanning with the kind of focus that had built her entire career. At first glance, everything looked normal. Base salaries aligned with company policy, payment dates recorded, totals balanced. Clean. Too clean. Angela narrowed her eyes. "Zoom in," she said. David adjusted the display, isolating individual employee records. Daniel. Angela tapped his name. His salary appeared immediately. Full amount, on time, perfect. Angela's expression didn't change. "Show actual transfer logs," she said. David paused, just for a fraction of a second. That wasn't standard viewing. Then he complied. The numbers shifted, and suddenly, they didn't match. The recorded salary remained the same, but the actual deposited amount was lower, by almost half. Angela felt something inside her chest tighten. Not confusion, not doubt, confirmation. "Check another," she said. David selected Lena Ortiz. Same pattern, full salary on record, reduced payment in reality. Marcus Hill. Same. The younger employee Angela had overheard earlier. Same. One by one, the pattern repeated. Consistent, precise, deliberate. Angela sat back slightly, her gaze fixed on the screen. "How far back?" she asked. David's fingers moved again, pulling older records. 6 months, a year, 2 years. The pattern didn't break. It extended, uninterrupted. David's voice lowered slightly. "This isn't recent." Angela didn't respond, because she was already looking at the timestamp. 2 years and 8 months, nearly 3 years. 3 years of quiet theft, 3 years of employees being paid less than they earned, 3 years of no escalation reaching her level. Angela's hand rested on her knee, fingers curling slowly inward. For the first time, the emotion she had been holding back slipped through. Not explosive, not loud, just controlled anger, cold, focused. "Who has access to modify these records?" she asked. David didn't need to check. "Branch-level authority," he said. "Manager approval required for adjustments." Angela's eyes didn't leave the screen. "Name." David tapped once. The file opened. Kevin Hale. Angela leaned back fully now, her gaze shifting from the data to the store across the street. From the outside, it looked normal. Customers entering, leaving, no chaos, no visible failure. But now she knew what was underneath. A system that looked perfect because it had been designed to hide its own corruption. David adjusted his glasses slightly. "This wasn't random," he said. "The percentages are consistent. The adjustments are masked as internal deductions. Whoever did this knew exactly how to avoid detection." Angela nodded once. Of course he did. Kevin had been there long enough to understand where oversight weakened, long enough to exploit it, and more importantly, long enough to realize no one was watching closely enough to stop him. Angela's jaw tightened slightly, not because of Kevin, because of herself. She had built this system. She had trusted it, and in doing so, she had allowed this to happen. Her fingers pressed lightly against the edge of the seat. "Total amount," she said. David calculated quickly. "Approximately $280,000, he replied. The number settled in the air. Heavy. Not because of its size, Angela had seen bigger numbers, but because of what it represented. That wasn't corporate loss. That was stolen survival. Rent, food, medicine. Daniel's daughter. Angela exhaled slowly. Her gaze drifted back to the store, to Register 3, to the man who had stood there, quietly braking while doing everything right. And suddenly, the situation simplified. Daniel wasn't poor. He wasn't failing. He wasn't unlucky. Angela spoke, her voice low but unmistakably firm. "He's not poor," she said. David looked at her. Angela's eyes hardened slightly as she continued. "He's being robbed." Silence filled the car, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that comes right before something changes. Angela reached for the door handle. David frowned slightly. "What are you going to do?" Angela paused. Her reflection stared back at her in the tinted glass. No longer just the composed CEO, but someone who had just seen the truth behind her own system. "For 3 years," she said slowly, "someone has been taking from them, and no one stopped it." She opened the door, stepped out, and for the first time since she walked into that store, she wasn't just observing anymore. She was about to act. Because now she understood something clearly. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, control, fear, and the kind of silence that only exists when people believe nothing will change. Angela closed the car door behind her, her eyes already fixed on the entrance. Kevin Hale was still inside, still working, still unaware. But not for long, because Angela wasn't here to confirm the truth anymore. She already had it. Now the only question left was, how do you take down someone who's been getting away with it for nearly 3 years? Justice could wait. A child's life couldn't. Angela stepped back into the store, but this time, everything looked different. The same shelves, the same flickering lights, the same quiet, controlled decay. But now she wasn't scanning for clues. She already had them. The numbers were clear, the pattern undeniable. Kevin Hale had been stealing from his own employees for nearly 3 years. And yet, Angela didn't walk toward the back office. She didn't confront Kevin. Not yet. Because there was something more urgent than exposing a crime. Someone more important than proving she was right. She walked straight to Register 3. Daniel was still there, still working, still holding himself together like nothing had happened. But now Angela could see the cracks more clearly. His movements were just slightly off rhythm, his breathing a little uneven. He had reached the point where endurance becomes mechanical, where the body continues even when the mind is already somewhere else. Angela stepped into his line again. This time, he noticed immediately. His eyes flickered with confusion. "You're back?" Angela placed nothing on the counter. "I need you to come with me," she said. Daniel froze. "What?" "For 10 minutes," Angela added calmly. "That's all." Daniel glanced at the line forming behind him, at the customers waiting, at the supervisor desk in the distance. His instinct kicked in instantly. "I can't," he said. "I'm on shift." Angela didn't raise her voice. "Get someone to cover," she said. Daniel shook his head. "It doesn't work like that." Angela held his gaze. "It does today." There was something in her tone, something steady, unshakable, that made him hesitate. He looked down, then back up. For a brief second, he looked like he might refuse. Then something inside him shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that someone had finally noticed. Or maybe he just didn't have the strength to say no anymore. "Give me a minute," he said quietly. 5 minutes later, they were outside. Daniel walked beside her, his steps uncertain, like someone who had stepped out of routine without fully understanding why. "Where are we going?" he asked. Angela didn't answer immediately. "Pharmacy," she said simply. Daniel stopped walking. "No," he said quickly. "I told you, I don't have—" Angela turned to face him. "I didn't ask if you have the money," she said. Silence. Daniel stared at her, confusion and disbelief mixing in his expression. "You don't even know me," he said. Angela didn't blink. "I know enough." The pharmacy sat 2 blocks away, bright and clean, the kind of place that felt sterile in a way that made everything inside seem more serious. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and something artificial, like a place designed to solve problems quickly, but not necessarily gently. Behind the counter stood a pharmacist, a man in his late 50s with thinning gray hair and a slightly stooped posture. His name tag read Mr. Collins. His face was lined with age and routine, but his eyes were sharp, accustomed to measuring urgency in people who walked through that door. He looked up as they approached. "Yes?" he asked. Daniel hesitated. Angela didn't. "What's the medication?" she said, glancing at Daniel. Daniel swallowed. It's called ceftriaxone," he said, his voice tightening slightly. "For pediatric use." Mr. Collins nodded, already moving toward the computer. His fingers typed quickly, his expression unchanged. "Dosage?" Daniel answered automatically. He had memorized every detail. "Price?" Angela asked. Mr. Collins checked the screen. $312, he said. The number landed heavier than it should have. Daniel's shoulders dropped slightly. Even hearing it again didn't make it easier. Angela reached into her jacket and pulled out her card. "No," Daniel said immediately. Angela didn't look at him. "Yes," she replied. "I can't let you do that," he insisted. Angela turned slightly, her eyes meeting his. "You're not letting me," she said. "I'm choosing to." Mr. Collins paused, glancing between them briefly. Then he continued the transaction. The machine beeped. Approved. Just like that. $300. Gone. Solved. For Angela, it was nothing. For Daniel, it was everything. Mr. Collins returned with a small white paper bag, placing it gently on the counter. Daniel stared at it. He didn't reach for it immediately. His hands hovered slightly in the air, like he wasn't sure it was real. Then, slowly, he picked it up. His fingers trembled, not from weakness, from release. Something inside him, something that had been stretched too tight for too long, finally loosened. He looked down at the bag, his grip tightening slightly, like it might disappear if he didn't hold on hard enough. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Angela didn't interrupt, because she understood that silence. It wasn't empty. It was full of everything he hadn't been able to say before. Finally, Daniel looked up. "Why?" he asked. It wasn't suspicion. It wasn't even disbelief anymore. It was something simpler. He needed to understand. Angela held his gaze, and for the first time since she had walked into that store, her answer wasn't calculated. It wasn't strategic. It was real. "Because tonight," she said quietly, "your daughter needs to live." The words settled between them. No explanation, no justification, just truth. Daniel blinked once, his eyes tightening as he tried to hold himself together again. But this time, he didn't fully succeed. A tear slipped down his face. He didn't hide it, not anymore. Angela turned slightly, giving him just enough space to recover without feeling exposed. Outside, the world continued as if nothing had changed. Cars passed, people walked, life moved forward, indifferent. But for Daniel, everything had shifted. Not permanently, not completely, but enough. Enough to get through the night. Enough to give his daughter a chance. Angela looked ahead, her expression returning to its usual calm, but something beneath it had changed. This wasn't just about exposing Kevin anymore. This wasn't just about fixing a system. This was about people. Real people. People who were breaking quietly while the system pretended everything was fine. Angela exhaled slowly, because now she knew something she couldn't ignore. Saving Daniel's daughter was the easy part. What came next would be much harder. Angela turned back toward the direction of the store. Kevin was still there, still working, still unaware. And now, Angela wasn't just walking back to observe. She was walking back with a purpose, because the truth was no longer hidden, the damage was no longer abstract, and the system was about to be tested. She took one step forward, then another. Daniel followed beside her, still holding the bag tightly, like it anchored him to something real again. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to, because the next move would change everything. But one question remained. After saving one life tonight, how many more were still being quietly destroyed inside that store? One conversation could expose the truth, or destroy the only life he had left, and Daniel had just walked into it. The hallway leading to the manager's office felt narrower than usual. Daniel could hear his own footsteps, too loud, too deliberate, echoing faintly against the walls. The store noise faded behind him, replaced by something heavier. Silence, the kind that builds pressure instead of relief. He stopped in front of the door. Kevin Hale's office. The nameplate was slightly crooked, like someone had adjusted it carelessly and never fixed it. Daniel stared at it for a second longer than necessary, then knocked. "Come in." The voice inside was calm. Too calm. Daniel pushed the door open. Kevin sat behind his desk, exactly as expected. Up close, he looked even more imposing. His broad shoulders filled the chair, his thick arms resting casually on the armrests, like he owned not just the office, but everything connected to it. His short hair was neatly trimmed, his shirt perfectly pressed, and his expression carried the quiet confidence of a man who hadn't been challenged in a long time. His eyes lifted slowly to Daniel, measured, calculating. "Yes?" Kevin said. Daniel stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The click of it locking into place sounded louder than it should have. "I need to talk to you," Daniel said. Kevin leaned back slightly. "About?" Daniel took one step forward, then another. Each movement felt unnatural, like he was walking into something he couldn't step out of anymore. He could feel the small recording device in his pocket. Active, listening, waiting. "I know what you've been doing," Daniel said. The room shifted, not visibly, but something changed. Kevin didn't react immediately. That was the first sign. A normal person would have asked what he meant. Kevin didn't. He just watched him, carefully. "Do you?" he said slowly. Daniel held his gaze. This was the moment Angela had prepared him for. No hesitation, no doubt. "I know about the pay," Daniel said. "The adjustments, the missing money." Silence. Kevin's expression didn't break, but his eyes narrowed slightly. And? He asked. Daniel's heart was pounding now, but his face stayed controlled. I'm not here to report it, he said. That landed. Kevin leaned forward just slightly. Now he was interested. Then why are you here? Daniel exhaled once, steadying himself. Because I need money, he said, and I know where it's going. Kevin stared at him, longer this time, reading him, measuring him, trying to decide if this was a threat or an opportunity. Daniel didn't look away. That was the key. Angela had told him, don't break eye contact, because the moment you look away, you lose. Kevin leaned back again, slowly. A faint smile appeared, not friendly, understanding. So, he said, you're smarter than I thought. Daniel didn't respond. Kevin continued. You figured it out, he said, and instead of panicking, you came to me. He nodded slightly. That's good. The shift was complete now. Daniel wasn't a risk anymore. He was useful. Kevin rested his elbows on the desk. Tell me, he said, what do you think is happening? Daniel stayed quiet. Kevin smirked slightly. Go on, he added. Daniel spoke carefully. I think you're adjusting payroll, he said. Small amounts, enough that no one notices at first. Kevin's smile widened. Not bad, he said. Daniel continued. And I think you've been doing it for a while. Kevin nodded once. 3 years, he said casually. The number hit harder out loud. Even Daniel felt it. 3 years. Confirmed. Recorded. Kevin leaned back, more relaxed now. You see, he continued, the system isn't perfect. There are gaps, places where numbers don't get checked closely enough. He tapped the desk lightly. And if you understand those gaps, you can use them. Daniel said nothing, because he didn't need to. Kevin was talking, exactly like Angela predicted. It started small, Kevin went on. Just adjustments, minor deductions. No one noticed, he shrugged. Then I realized something. He leaned forward again, his voice lowering slightly. No one wanted to notice. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. Kevin smiled. People here don't ask questions, he said, and the ones who do, he paused, then shrugged again. They don't last. Sarah. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. Kevin noticed. You remember her, Kevin said. Not a question, a statement. Daniel didn't answer. Kevin chuckled softly. She was a problem, he said. Smart, persistent, thought she could fix things. His tone changed slightly, dismissive. She couldn't. The room felt colder. Kevin leaned back fully now, completely at ease. Do you know how much this adds up to? He asked. Daniel stayed silent. Kevin didn't wait. Over $200,000, he said. He smiled again. Not bad for a few small adjustments. The air in the room tightened. Daniel could feel it. Everything Angela needed was right here, on record. So, Kevin said, tilting his head slightly, what do you want? Daniel forced himself to stay calm. A share, he said. The word felt wrong, heavy, but necessary. Kevin studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Fair, he said. He reached for a pen on his desk. Because if you're going to stay quiet, he added, you should be compensated. That was it. The final piece. Complete, documented, unavoidable. The door opened. Kevin didn't even look up at first. Not now, he said casually. But then he heard the footsteps. Different, confident, uninvited. He looked up, and everything changed. Angela stood in the doorway. No cap, no disguise. Just herself. Her posture straight, her expression calm, but her eyes, cold, unmistakably in control. Kevin froze. For the first time since Daniel walked in, he looked uncertain. Who are... he started. Angela didn't let him finish. You don't need to explain, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room instantly. She stepped forward, pulling her phone from her pocket, placed it on the desk. The recording was already playing. Kevin's voice, clear, undeniable, every word he had just said. Kevin's face drained of color. Angela met his eyes. My name is Angela Brooks, she said. She paused, let it settle. I'm the CEO of this company. Silence, heavy, final. Kevin's hand tightened around the pen, then loosened, because there was nothing left to hold on to. The door opened again. This time, 2 security officers stepped in, both tall, dressed in dark suits, their presence immediate and controlled. One of them, a man in his late 30s with a square jaw and closely shaved head, positioned himself quietly near Kevin's side. The other remained near the door, blocking the exit without needing to say a word. Kevin looked between them, then back at Angela. The confidence he had built for 3 years collapsed in seconds. "This is a misunderstanding," he said quickly. Angela didn't respond. "You've already explained everything," she said. Her tone didn't rise, didn't shift, because it didn't need to. The truth was already in the room. Kevin opened his mouth again, then stopped, because he knew there was no version of this where he walked out clean. Daniel stood still. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, because he didn't need to. For the first time, he wasn't the one being controlled. Angela turned slightly toward him, just a glance, but it said everything. It's done. Kevin sank back into his chair, defeated, exposed, finished. 3 years of control ended in one conversation, one decision, one moment. Angela picked up the phone, turned off the recording, and looked at Kevin one last time. No anger, no satisfaction, just certainty. Because this wasn't the end. Not yet. This was just the moment everything became visible. The real impact was still waiting outside that door. The employees, the truth, the consequences. Angela stepped back. The security officers moved forward, and Kevin Hale disappeared from power as quickly as he had built it. Daniel finally exhaled, slow, unsteady, like his body was catching up to everything that had just happened. Angela walked toward the door, stopped, then turned slightly, because one question still remained. If one man could do this for 3 years without being stopped, how many other places were still hiding the same truth? For 3 years, they stayed silent, not because they didn't know, but because they believed nothing would ever change. Today, that silence was about to break. The store didn't shut down. That was the first thing Angela noticed. Even after Kevin was escorted out through the back corridor, even after the quiet tension rippled through the staff like a shockwave no one could fully contain, the doors remained open. Customers still walked in. Registers still beeped. But something had shifted, subtle, unmistakable. People were watching now, not just their work, each other. Angela stepped out from the back hallway into the main floor. The moment she appeared, conversation stopped. Employees who had been pretending not to notice suddenly froze, their eyes drawn toward her with quiet, cautious curiosity. Word had already spread, fast, uneven, fragmented, but enough. Something had happened, something big. Angela didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply stood in the center of the store where the aisles opened wide and waited. One by one, employees began to gather. Lena Ortiz was the first to step forward, her posture slightly stiff, her hands clasped together in front of her like she wasn't sure what to do with them. Her eyes moved quickly, scanning Angela's face, searching for clues, fear, reassurance, anything. Marcus Hill followed, slower, more guarded. His broad frame still carried that same quiet tension, but now there was something else beneath it, attention. His arms crossed loosely, not defensive, just ready. The younger employee Angela had seen earlier hovered near the edge of the group, shifting his weight nervously, his gaze flicking between Angela and the back hallway where Kevin had disappeared. And Daniel. Daniel stood slightly apart, still holding the empty paper bag, still trying to process everything that had just happened. Angela looked at all of them, really looked. For the first time, not as data points, not as employees, not as part of a system, but as people. People who had been carrying something for far too long. She took a breath, then spoke. "My name is Angela Brooks," she said. There was a ripple in the crowd. Some already knew. Others were just now understanding. "I am the CEO of this company." Silence followed. Not disbelief, something deeper, recognition. Angela didn't pause long. 3 years ago, she continued, something started happening in this store. Her voice remained steady, controlled. Money was taken from your paychecks. A shift moved through the group. Not surprise, confirmation. You noticed it, Angela said. Some of you questioned it. Her eyes moved briefly, just briefly, toward Daniel. And at least one of you tried to report it. Sarah. Even without saying her name, they all knew. Angela's expression tightened slightly. And nothing changed. That landed because it was true, not just for them, for her. Angela let the silence sit for a moment longer. Then she said the one thing that mattered most. I'm sorry. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it cut deeper than anything else she had said. Because this should have been stopped, she continued, and it wasn't. Her voice didn't break, but it carried weight now, real weight. Not because no one noticed, she added. Her gaze sharpened slightly, but because the system I built failed to listen. That changed the room, because this wasn't just an apology, it was accountability. Angela stepped slightly forward. That ends today, she said. Her tone shifted, still calm, but firmer now. The person responsible has been removed, she continued, and the case has already been escalated for legal action. A quiet murmur moved through the group. Marcus's posture changed slightly, less guarded now. Lena's hand lifted unconsciously to her mouth, her eyes widening just a fraction. The younger employee blinked rapidly as if trying to process what he was hearing. Angela didn't stop. Every dollar that was taken from you, she said, will be returned. The room stilled. Not a sound. Not just the base amount, she added, but with interest. That was when it hit. Fully, completely, real. Lena's eyes filled first. She didn't cry immediately, but something inside her broke, quietly, visibly. Her shoulders dropped slightly, the tension she had been carrying releasing all at once. Marcus looked down, his jaw tightening, not from anger, but from something heavier. Relief, maybe, the kind that comes too late, but still matters. The younger employee let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but without humor, just disbelief turning into something real. Daniel didn't move. He just stood there, still. Because for him, this wasn't just about money. This was about everything that had led to that moment in the pharmacy, everything that had almost cost him his daughter. Angela's voice softened slightly. Payments will begin within the week, she said. She paused, then added quietly, and this will never happen again. No one clapped. No one cheered, because this wasn't that kind of moment. This was something else, something quieter, more real. Lena wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed by the reaction, but unable to stop it. Marcus nodded once, almost to himself, like he was accepting something he hadn't allowed himself to believe before. The younger employee looked around, as if checking whether this was actually happening or just something he had imagined. And Daniel finally exhaled. A slow, steady breath, the kind that comes after holding everything in for too long. Angela watched them all, because this was the part that mattered most. Not the exposure, not the confrontation. This, the moment when people realized they weren't invisible anymore. Angela turned slightly, her gaze drifting toward the entrance of the store. Outside, the world hadn't changed. Cars still moved, people still walked, but inside, something had shifted permanently. Not just the system, the people, the belief, the silence. It had cracked. Angela stepped back, giving them space, because this wasn't about her anymore. It never really was. As the employees slowly began to return to their positions, something was different. Small, subtle, but undeniable. Lena moved with more purpose. Marcus stood a little straighter. The younger employee didn't look down as much. And Daniel, when he returned to register 3, his hands were still steady, but his eyes were different. Angela watched him for a moment longer, then turned to leave. because there was still more to fix, more to understand, more to uncover, and one thought remained, clearer than ever. If this could happen here, for 3 years, then how many other places were still waiting for someone to finally listen? It didn't end with an arrest. It didn't end with money returned, because the real change is the kind you can't see on a report. 2 weeks later, the store felt different. Not louder, not busier, just alive again. The smell was gone. Clean air moved through the aisles, subtle but noticeable, like the building itself had finally been allowed to breathe. The shelves were full now, aligned properly, products facing forward with intention instead of neglect. Lights that had once flickered had been replaced, casting an even, steady glow across the floor. But none of that was what mattered most. It was the people. Lena Ortiz no longer hunched when she worked. Her posture had changed, not dramatically, but enough. She stood straighter now, her movements more deliberate, her eyes no longer scanning the room in quiet caution. Instead, she looked at customers directly when they approached, her voice carrying a confidence that hadn't been there before. Marcus Hill still carried the same broad frame, the same rough edges in his expression, but something inside him had softened. The tension that once defined him had eased, replaced by a quieter sense of control. He no longer shut down conversations when someone questioned something. Now, he answered. The younger employee, his name was Evan Carter, just 21, thin and restless with nervous energy, no longer looked over his shoulder when he spoke. His movements were still quick, still slightly uncertain, but the fear that once followed him had faded. Not completely, but enough. And Daniel was still at Register 3, but not the same Daniel. His daughter was home. Her name was Emily, 5 years old, with soft brown curls that framed her face and large, curious eyes that seemed too bright for someone who had just spent days in a hospital bed. Her skin still carried the faint paleness of recovery, but her energy had returned in small bursts, laughter that came unexpectedly, questions that never stopped. Daniel had visited her every night after work, sat beside her bed, held her hand, watched her breathe. And now, she was back. Safe. That alone had changed something inside him. Not everything, but enough. Angela stood near the entrance again, not in disguise this time. No cap, no attempt to blend in. People noticed her now, but that wasn't the point anymore. She didn't need to hide to see the truth, because the truth was no longer hiding. She watched Daniel as he worked, same steady hands, same rhythm, but his eyes were different. They weren't empty anymore. They weren't holding something back. They were present. Angela turned slightly, her phone already in her hand. She dialed. Daniel answered on the second ring. "Hello?" "It's Angela," she said. There was a brief pause, not hesitation, recognition. "Yes," he replied. "I need to speak with you," she said. "About what?" "Your future." Silence. Not long, just enough. "When?" he asked. "Now," she said. They met in the same office Kevin had once occupied, but it didn't feel the same. The air was different, lighter, cleaner. Daniel stood near the door at first, unsure whether to sit. Angela gestured toward the chair across from her. "Sit," she said. He did, carefully, like someone who still wasn't used to being invited into that space. Angela didn't waste time. "I've reviewed everything," she said. "Your performance, your record, what happened here." Daniel nodded slightly. "I did what you asked," he said. Angela met his eyes. "I know." Silence settled briefly. Then she continued. "I'm offering you a promotion." Daniel blinked. The word didn't register immediately. "A promotion?" he repeated. Angela nodded. "Supervisory role," she said. "To start." Daniel leaned back slightly, his expression tightening, not from excitement but disbelief. "I think there's a mistake," he said. Angela didn't respond. "I'm just a cashier," he added. There it was, the way he saw himself. Not wrong, just incomplete. Angela leaned forward slightly. "No," she said. Her voice was calm, certain. "You're the one who stepped forward, when everyone else stayed silent." Daniel didn't respond because he didn't know how to. Angela continued. You saw what was happening, she said. You understood the risk. She paused. And you did it anyway. Daniel looked down at his hands, still steady, but now unsure. That doesn't make me a manager, he said quietly. Angela shook her head slightly. No, she said. It makes you someone I can trust. Silence. Heavy. Real. Daniel exhaled slowly, because this wasn't just an opportunity. It was a shift. In identity. In direction. In everything. I don't know if I'm ready, he admitted. Angela didn't push. She didn't need to. You weren't ready for what happened 3 weeks ago either, she said. That landed, because it was true. And you handled it, she added. Daniel looked up again. This time, different. Less doubt. More thought. Angela leaned back slightly. Think about it, she said. Daniel nodded, slowly, but this time, not out of fear, out of consideration. A few days later, the answer came. Yes. The transition wasn't dramatic. There was no announcement, no ceremony, just change. Small at first, then noticeable. Daniel began moving differently, not above people, among them. He listened, watched, noticed things, the same way Angela had. One afternoon, something small happened. A customer stood at the register. An older man, mid-70s, with thin gray hair and slightly trembling hands. His coat was worn but clean, his posture careful, like every movement had been measured over time. The total came up. He hesitated, checked his wallet, then again. I think I'm short, he said quietly. The cashier froze, uncertain. Daniel was already walking over. He didn't ask questions. Didn't hesitate. He simply pulled out his card, paid, done. The man looked at him, confused at first, then grateful. But Daniel didn't wait for thanks. He just nodded once and moved on, like it was nothing. From across the store, Angela watched. She didn't step in, didn't interrupt, because this wasn't something she needed to lead. This was the result. The thing that couldn't be measured. The thing that didn't show up in reports, the thing that actually mattered. She turned slightly, walking toward the exit. The same doors, the same store, but not the same place. Not anymore. Because now someone was paying attention, not just to numbers, but to people. Angela paused at the entrance, just for a second, because one thought stayed with her, clearer than anything else. A company doesn't collapse because of losses. It collapses when the people who see the truth choose to stay silent. And now, the silence was gone. A company doesn't collapse because of losses. It collapses when the people who see the truth choose to stay silent. And for the first time in that store, the silence was gone. If this story made you stop and think, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Daniel's place? Would you stay silent or risk everything to expose the truth?